Hi, I'm Roush Jr. and today I'm at the Roush collection and just want to give you guys a little virtual tour of some of the cars that we have here. We have a wide range of vehicles in the collection, things from our history really. You know, most museums or most car collections are made up of cars that people buy just because they're interested in them, and there are some of those here, but the collection is mostly made up of vehicles that tell part of our story. Right here we have a hydrogen land speed record car that set the speed record at Bonneville in 2007 for Ford Motor Company. Pretty neat project that we were involved with. It reached a top speed of 207 miles per hour. Pretty amazing. Some of these older cars here are cars that we've raced in what's called the Great Race. It's a road rally that literally goes across the United States, different routes each year. And it's not so much for speed as much as accuracy of time on various routes. And there's different rules for the different era cars. I've done a little bit of that myself. It's a lot of fun, really challenging. I've also had the chance to drive some of these cars in a few parades, which is also a lot of fun. Here's a car my dad has a lot of fun with. He's very much into World War II and especially the warbird history around World War II. This is just a fun vehicle that you might see him in driving around at Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Air Show and things like that. Over here we have a pretty neat car. It was named Sudden Death, and it really just a street performance car that my dad built, I believe back in the 70s for a customer. My sister bought this back just last year from another owner, not the original owner, but someone who acquired it later on. But pretty neat to have this history. It actually had some articles written about it in the newspaper at that time. A little bit of a mix of things here. Some of our NASCAR history with Greg Biffle's race car, the famous number 16. Some of our old road racing cars. This one here was pretty unique. It's from the very beginning of, actually even before my dad teamed up with Zach Speed. For a little while, when my dad first got into road racing, the name of the team was Zach Speed Roush. Zach Speed was out of Europe. Ford had us team up with them. Carl Edwards, famous Office Depot livery. Chad Little's 97 John Deere NASCAR, very distinct look. And here's a pretty famous one, Mark Martin's number 6 Valvoline car. And of course, another Mark Martin car, the Stroh's Light number 6. Pretty iconic car in its time. And who can't remember the number 6 Viagra car? Yeah, a lot of history here. Too many stories to really tell here, but it's neat just to see the cars that actually ran. And over here we have a little bit from my road racing history. The graphic is a little messed up right now, but this was the 61 car that I ran, an FR500C. And this car may be a little unassuming. It just has flat red paint job, but that was by design. We really wanted this to look like as much like a real street car as possible. Really show how great the Mustang is up against manufacturers of all different types. One of the things I love about the racing I've done is that this is actually street chassis, a production chassis vehicle. It does have modifications for racing, but it's essentially a Ford Mustang street car that's been modified. So really cool. And well, I have to tell the story too about this car. So for me, this may be personal favorite race car. And the reason is that we got the 400th Roush win back in 2010 at Homestead Speedway. It started from the back of the field. We got pulled during qualifying, but the series didn't like something on the car, the brake ducts in the front, and they bumped us to the back. But apparently that wasn't what made this car fast, because we drove through the field and won that day and got the 400th win. So I'm very proud of what our team did and what this car did in the Ford Motor Company. Another one of my cars here, Boss Mustang from a little bit later period. Again, following the same theme of the red paint. Over here we have a collection of my dad's early road racing cars. When these ran on the track, there's some that were a little bit later, like this one, Tommy Kendall's, and we'll get to that in a second. But these ran when I was growing up in late elementary school, middle school, and really made an impression on me growing up. This number 11 car, there's a lot to talk about here. XR4 Ti, Mercury XR4 Ti is the name of the vehicle. Really unique sound. When you saw these on the track, they'd make a chirping sound because of the turbos. The number 11 is kind of unique, or there's a neat story about that. Starting back in 1980, when I was just 6 years old, I turned 7 that year, my dad had me start in go-karting, and I raced under the number 11. It was not a number that we raced with at that time. And my dad later took that number and made that part of his stable of numbers. You know, there's a couple handfuls of them, but I'm pretty proud that he decided to take that and put the 11 on some of these great cars driven by some amazing drivers. Scott Pruitt, pretty amazing driver in his own right here. The first race I saw Scott drive in, he started from the back and won the race, and it was just a little sprint race. I think it was about 30 minutes. Up until that time, he was a very accomplished go-kart racer, but apparently he's good at driving other things too. In just the past few years, he's retired, and I don't think he's doing racing right now. Here's another car with quite a story behind it. Nobody's Fool. It's the name of a Paul Newman movie back in the day. And so Paul Newman wanted to do the Daytona 24 Hours with us. He had been a competitor of ours, a competitor that we had a lot of respect for, and I would even say a friendship. And he, don't know the full story, but I don't believe he had his team at that time, but he did want to do the Daytona 24-hour race. And Paramount Pictures decided to sponsor him for it for his 70th birthday. Well, it turns out that they won the race, and driving with all these other great drivers as well. Over here we have a very unique looking car. If you've followed road racing for a while, there's a good chance you'll recognize this. The John Player Special car, driven by a Finnish driver, Robert Lapalanian. And very unique look. I don't think John Player Special is around anymore, and if they were, they wouldn't be able to sponsor a race car given the restrictions on advertising of tobacco. This car has quite a story to it. Tommy Kendall's all-sport Mustang. This car was so dominant, it was pretty much unstoppable. It won, in one season, it won 11 consecutive races. I've never even heard of that before. Just crazy how successful this was. Over here we have a little lineup of Ford GTs, and these really tell a story. This is the most recent production of the Ford GT, an actual production model. amazing car. I've always loved these, going back to the very early ones. And just an amazing story too, obviously. It's pretty cool. We have connection to a lot of these cars. The engine built by Roush Yates, and in a previous model we worked on quite a bit of the engineering work, and this is actually not a production model. It's a little rougher than you would see in a showroom Ford GT. That's because this was used to help develop the production. It's an engineering mule. The light there is not a production light. It's just, I think that's off of a F-150, just something that they could put on there to make it street legal and test out the other things with the car. And really put it through its paces to make sure the production model had all the quality, durability, and performance that it needed. And here's an actual production model of that. Here we have a Cunningham. Looks like a car, but it's actually not. It's they call this a rolling model. You can't sit in it. It's completely solid. There's no engine. It just appears to be a real vehicle, and it's essentially a concept car, a non-running concept car. Just walking into a side room of the museum here. Mostly Roush performance vehicles in this room. So here we have what looks kind of strange, I'm sure, to you guys. This is truly a clay model created by our design studio, and it's been used for a lot of different things. So you might be wondering, why would Roush do a clay model of a car? You can do design with computers now, and shouldn't that be good enough? And trust me, we do that. We have a pretty extensive set of capabilities in designing in CAD, and that's typically where the design work starts. Or actually, that's not true. We typically start with illustrations and go to the computer after that. Looking at a product in real life, though, being able to walk up to it, see its lines, see how the paint reflects the light in person to scale is still a really important part of the experience of what a car's character is. So we created this model. We have a bunch of milling machines for clay at our studio, and took a big block of clay, cut it out with the mill based on our computer designs, and came up with this, starting with the base chassis of the Mustang, but then adding our own pieces onto it, like the splitter that you see here, little side pockets, grill, even testing out different types of paint. Starting with the 2015 Mustang, we looked to prove out a lot of the pieces that we put on the car, but this, as you can see, is not a standard 2015 vehicle. It was used to prove out a design that we were doing with Ford, and that was for an auction vehicle for Oshkosh, and you can see that vehicle right here. Ford gave us the chance to design and build a vehicle that was auctioned to raise money for charity, an educational charity, at the Oshkosh Air Show. And you might also be wondering, if we auctioned off this car, what's it doing here? Well, there's a lot to talk about. The Old Crow is the name of a World War II airplane. You might remember a minute ago I was talking about how my dad is really passionate about World War II, its history, and the warbirds from that era. The Old Crow is the name of a plane flown by a pilot named Bud Anderson. Bud is a very good friend of my father's, and My dad has a couple P-51 Mustangs. One of them is made to honor and represent the Old Crow, the original Old Crow. And so for this auction vehicle, we decided to honor that history, honor Bud, and make this represent his plane. Well, it turns out my dad was at the auction and couldn't stand to see that thing go away, so he made the winning bid on it, and we have it in our collection here. Pretty cool. Well, that's the tour, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys are staying safe, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.